What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the neighborhood, and thank you for spending part of your day with us today. If you're a returning listener, thank you and welcome back. And if this happens to be your first episode, thank you and welcome to the show. On this episode, we're going to be talking about The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. Welcome to the podcast where two longtime friends and sometimes a guest talk about their favorite games from the perspective of an average player. My name is Andrew Kimball.
And I'm Dylan Wren, and we are your friendly neighborhood gamers.
The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt is a 2015 action role-playing game developed and published by CD Projekt Red. It is a sequel to the 2011 game The Witcher 2 Assassin of Kings and the third game in the Witcher video game series. The game follows the Witcher series of fantasy novels written by Andrzej Sapkowski. The game takes place in a fictional fantasy world based on Slavic mythology. Players control Geralt of Rivia, a monster slayer for hire known as a Witcher, and search for his adopted daughter, who is on the run from the otherworldly Wild Hunt. Players battle the game's many dangers with weapons and magic, interact with non-playable characters, and complete quests to acquire experience points and gold, which are used to increase Geralt's abilities and purchase equipment. The game's story has 3 possible endings determined by the player's choices at key points in the narrative. The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt was released for PlayStation 4, Windows, and Xbox One in May 2015, with a Nintendo Switch version released in October 2019, and a PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X and S version titled The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt Complete Edition, which was released in December 2022. The game received critical acclaim with praise for its gameplay, narrative, world design, combat, and visuals, although it received minor criticism due to technical issues. It holds more than 200 Game of the Year awards and has been cited as one of the greatest video games ever made. 2 expansions were also released to critical acclaim, Hearts of Stone and Blood and Wine. The game shipped over 40 million copies, making it one of the best-selling video games of all time. I was one of those people cited as calling it the greatest video game ever made.
Oh yeah. It's on their box, I think. When you buy a new copy of the game, the complete edition or whatever, it's, in small print, but
right.
One of the greatest games ever, Andrew Kimball.
Yeah, formerly Level Playing Field.
Yeah.
Your friendly neighborhood gamers.
Yeah, that's the only reason we're doing this episode, is so that when they can update the box so that they can add you as like Andrew Kimball, your friendly neighborhood gamers.
Yeah, for like the 5 people that buy boxes still.
Yeah, it's probably in like whatever their trailer is. That's like,
oh yeah,
boom, boom, like their Game of the Year noms and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so I guess before we dive into the full conversation, we'll throw out how we're going to structure it spoiler-wise. For this episode, we're going to try to keep story spoilers and like the ending and stuff like that to the back half of the conversation. We'll give a warning and probably some music or something before we go into spoilers. But there's a lot to talk about before we even get there. So I guess we can dive right into it. Let's just start with our experiences with this game. I know yours is unique in we've talked about it before, but in how long it took you to actually complete the game. So I guess let's start with yours.
Yeah, so I was buying I was watching like game trailers and stuff, and I saw a trailer for The Witcher 3. It's the one that like doesn't actually take place until like the DLC. It's like the one where he's hunting a vampire, and so it kind of like goes through the whole him getting to the place, him like prepping oils and potions and stuff, and then going in and like hunting, and it shows you him hunting the vampire in there using like bombs and that sort of thing. So it was a really cool like, hey, this is what you're actually going to be doing in the game sort of thing, if you care.
like a good tone
Yeah.
piece for what the game was
Exactly.
supposed to be.
Like he is a monster hunter hunting this monster, and he goes in and he does that. And so it was a really cool trailer just in general.
Had you played 2? Were you familiar with the series at all up to that point?
I'm trying to think. I think I had played 2, and I had played a little bit of 1, but 1's old.
Yeah, it's
and hard to get into. But I think I did play through all of 2. So like I was aware of The Witcher, because they gave at some point they gave The Witcher 2 away for free with Games with Gold, I think. Like I don't think I purchased Witcher 2.
Okay.
But I went through and I played The Witcher 2. And so I was aware of the series, but I watched that trailer, and then right around that same time I was watching, like they announced the new Star Wars Battlefront game was coming out. And so I was finally like, all right, I need to go ahead and like buy an Xbox One.
Yeah.
And so 2015, I bought my Xbox One and I ordered the Master Chief Collection, Star Wars Battlefront, and The Witcher 3. Those were like my 3 games that I bought with the game with my Xbox One. And so I started playing The Witcher. I think The Witcher 3 came first because like I think it took a little bit. I think The Witcher 3 came in the same box. Amazon was shipping it to me together. Master Chief Collection came later, and I had pre-ordered Battlefront. And so The Witcher 3 was like the first game basically I was playing on my Xbox One. And so started it, loved it, played a ton of it, and I was playing it in such a way that basically I was like doing everything in an area before I was moving on, which seemed much more doable in the first area, in like White Orchard. Where it's just kind of like, oh, okay, I finished like doing these things. Cool. Gonna move on to the next one. And then it like just opens up the entire map, and it's like there are so many question marks, there's so many side quests, there's so many little things, and they're like they were all super good, so I kept wanting to do them. It wasn't like one of those things where it's just like, I'm not having fun with this, let me just mainline the story. It was like, no, I want to keep doing everything. And so because I was playing it in that way, I eventually like got distracted by other games because I was playing The Witcher 3 so much, and I wanted to play the Master Chief Collection. I wanted to play Star Wars Battlefront when it came out, that sort of thing. And so I, fell off of it for a bit. It was still installed. It was still something that I would launch into every now and then and like run around, do some side quests in. But I pretty much like made it to Skellige the first time and then like fell off of it. And then fell off of it for a while. So eventually I came back to it, a year or 2 later and restarted it because I was like, I don't really remember what was going on. Let me pick it back up from the beginning and just go through and see. And at that point, they had released some patches and stuff. Like there were a couple of quests that I wasn't able to finish previously because they were bugged. And so then at that point, I did the same thing where I was going through. I was doing everything, exploring all of that kind of stuff, and playing other games in between, so I'd like have a week or 2 where I'd be super on board with The Witcher and then go play something else for a month and then come back to The Witcher. And so I was playing it like that, and it became kind of like a running joke because at that point we were doing level playing field that The Witcher was the best game that I'd never finished.
Right.
And was also like actively still trying to finish.
Right.
And so eventually we made it to, level playing field ended and we were getting ready to start this podcast. And I had still never finished it. And so I eventually sat down and was like, okay, over this Christmas break, I'm just going to play The Witcher and I'm going to like hammer it out and actually finish the game. And I did. I did finally manage to finish The Witcher 3. Like I said, I got the game as one of the first games on my Xbox One in 2015. Finished it in, I guess that would have been like, 2022? Like end of 2021, beginning of 2022.
Yeah, last year.
Yeah.
Early last year.
Where I finally, I was playing it over December and January.
Right.
And so I finally finished it in 2022. I forget if I finished the base game in like December, January, or whatever. But did that, played Hearts of Stone, finished that DLC. Have not fully finished Blood and Wine because I got distracted.
It's
but
like a whole nother game.
Yeah,
too, yeah.
But it's been having fun with it, and like I said, it's still one of those that's installed that I keep going back to, and I know like the things that basically kind of like I know how the game ends essentially, like if you finish all of that, but I haven't quite gotten there yet. But it is still a fantastic game that I have enjoyed so much, and like I said, it's been one that basically has never gotten uninstalled. Like, it was one of the first things I installed on my Xbox Series X when I got it, and then I've continued to just hop into it every now and then and run around and enjoy that world and play some Gwent, do some little monster hunts, run around trying to collect different pieces of Witcher armor. Like there's so many things you can do in that game besides just doing the main quest. So,
oh yeah. And it's all, well, yeah, most of it is such like high quality content. I mean, there's still some like treasure hunts and little things here and there that's like meh.
Yeah.
But most of the like side content is just as good, in some cases better than the main content.
Yeah, exactly. Like any side quests where you're talking to somebody in general is like pretty good. Occasionally you'll find like some sort of like note scrawled somewhere that's like, hey, take a boat out to this random point in the middle of the ocean and dive down, and boom, there's a secret stash of my stuff there. And it's like, okay, well that side quest was kind of boring, but for the most part, it's like, they could have just left you a note or like had a very simplistic like, hey, there's this troll over here, go kill it. And you could have just gone and you could have just killed it. But instead, it's like this whole like morality thing that you've got. Like you talk to the troll, and now you're like, oh, well, he doesn't really seem to be hurting anybody. Maybe those other people are actually the bad guys. And now I've got to figure out what to do. And like the game lets you like, it doesn't force you down one path or the other. It's kind of just presents its information and is like, what do you do? And we've thought about this, so here are some choices. So
yeah, and all the while, most of the options make sense for Geralt as a character, because it's like you don't get to make your own character and then fall through this like morality system. You're not playing one of those blank slate characters. Like Geralt is a character that existed in the books. He is a little bit different in the games, but I mean it's close enough. And the Geralt that's established in the games, most of the time the choice is presented, it's like, oh yeah, I could see a case for either one of these options that would make sense in his eyes, his reasoning. Yeah,
because like whatever you choose, they narratively make it as though Geralt was choosing it, and in a way that makes sense for like if Geralt chose to like either kill this troll or not, like this is why and how he would do that. Versus, like something like Mass Effect sometimes where it's like, well, Commander Shepard wouldn't actually, do this based on what we know about them, but here they are. We had to have both a good and a bad option here. So
yeah, it's a tricky thing to do. And I think for me, that was like kind of the thing that blew me away playing this game originally back in 2015. Because for me, I played The Witcher 2 on Xbox 360, just kind of on a whim. Hadn't really ever heard of it, but was just kind of itching for like a Lord of the Rings-esque like fantasy adventure. And I think that was probably around the time where I first tried Dark Souls, trying to scratch that itch, and was like, oh, this is not what I was expecting. And so I tried The Witcher 2, played it on easy, because that game is pretty janky.
Yeah.
But there was just like a certain point where all of a sudden the narrative like really picked up, and I just kind of fell in love with the world.
Yeah.
So The Witcher 3 then was going to be, like you said, a next-gen video game, and Geralt was going to have a horse, and it was going to be fully open world. And it was one of those games where I was like flipping through Game Informer, rereading the same article, looking at the same pictures, like just getting hyped.
Yeah.
And it's one of those games that lived up to the hype. I think very rarely that seems to happen, especially these days. I don't get hyped like that anymore. Probably Elden Ring was the last time that has happened. So about the time that the game came out, finally released, I had just gotten dumped. So my life was in a bit of turmoil. And so The Witcher 3 became like my therapy, became like my comfort. Like basically anytime I wasn't working or wasn't like at the gym or whatever, I was playing The Witcher 3.
Yeah.
And I just like moved out of my parents' house not too long before that. So like I would just come home and just fall into that world, and that was it. And so at the time, I didn't really think about video games on like any kind of a deeper level, so I didn't really understand why, but it was just the way that everything in the game is done with so much care, like we've been talking about, that the writing is good, everything that you choose makes sense for Geralt. The fact that you can make all these choices, because at the time, we didn't have games like this.
Yeah.
Like we had some games where you could make the good choice or the bad choice, right? Like Mass Effect or maybe some Dragon Age games or stuff like that.
Yeah.
Or if you really wanted to like go into like, I don't know if the older Baldur's Gate kind of games had that, but those games didn't have the like AAA presentation that I really enjoyed.
Yeah, exactly. There were games that let you make choices, but not in such a smooth narrative way outside of maybe some of the BioWare games. And like the BioWare games were much more like cartoon. Like this was, The Witcher is much more middle ground gray. Whereas, you know, like BioWare games, I'm talking like Knights of the Old Republic, where it's like you either make the almost cartoonishly good choice or cartoonishly evil choice, or like or Mass Effect, where it's like most of the decisions you're making are like, I'm the good guy, like Captain America, or like I'm the bad guy, like Tony Stark. You know, like where it's still like you're making choices, but in a much more constrained way. Whereas The Witcher really does kind of feel the most like a D&D type of game, where it's like, here are all these choices that your character is making, but there's not like an obvious, like, this is the right one sort of choice. It's like, what do you want to do? How do you want to make it? And we'll go from there.
Yeah. And then not only the fact that the choices, you didn't really always know what the good, quote unquote, sometimes there wasn't a good choice.
Yeah.
But also the fact that basically every choice paid off in some way. Like sometimes it was immediate, sometimes it was quick, sometimes it was, I'm either going to get gold or I'm not, you know, little things like that. Sometimes it would affect the end of the game or lock off an entire quest line or open up an entire quest line. And some games, like we mentioned, were doing stuff like that, but just not to this scale and not necessarily in this like this production level, I guess. And also staying so true to the property that it was based on. I think that was another thing that hooked me, because like I said, I went into this franchise kind of looking for that Lord of the Rings fantasy game. And The Witcher is so much more gritty.
Yeah.
And so even though there's mages and trolls and, you know, you're a guy with two swords on his back that has cat eyes or whatever, a lot of what you're dealing with felt real, because like you said, it wasn't the kind of comically cartoonish, like, oh, this is obviously the Jedi option, this is obviously the Sith option. You know, it was like, ooh, there'd be times where you just kind of sit on a dialogue choice, like, if I don't answer this correctly, it could really impact what's going on here in a negative way, and I don't want that to happen. And so that really kind of, I think that mixed with the fact that the combat was good enough and it had that high quality, but it had it for such a long time. Like this game, especially for where I was in my life and where I was as a gamer, I was like, man, I'm getting so much value out of the $60 I paid for this game. And also at the same time, Joe, who's been on this show, and Braden, my brother, were playing through it. And so we were just having like all sorts of conversations about like, what did you do here? What did you do here? That kind of thing. So I beat the game, immediately rolled into New Game Plus. Like that's probably the first time I've ever done that. And I immediately started it over, kept all my stuff, kept playing.
And when you played it originally, was any of the DLC out yet, or was that
this was like
at launch, basically?
At launch. This was, I picked it up. I pre-ordered it. I had it the day it came out.
Yeah.
And then, so rolled into New Game Plus, played through that, probably another like year or so later, I did a Death March playthrough
Yeah.
to get that achievement. Then after I got my PlayStation, I think I did my Death March playthrough when the DLC came out.
Yeah.
Because then I rolled into the DLC, and the DLC spikes up the difficulty quite a bit.
Yes, it does.
So,
Yes, it does.
but there's also, I don't think, an achievement tied to Death March for the DLC.
So you could beat the base game
And then
on
drop
Death
it.
March and then drop it
Yeah,
down
and then
to like
drop
normal.
it. I think I'm remembering that correctly.
That
But anyways,
sounds right.
So then I played that. Then, yeah, I did another playthrough like right after my wife and I got married and we were living in our first apartment. I remember playing it there. And then after I got my PlayStation, it was on sale on the PS Store for like $10. I'm
Yeah.
like, I could go for another playthrough
Oh,
and
yeah.
get the trophies. So I did that. And then most recently, and kind of what spurred this episode to be recorded now, like it's a game we figured we'd talk about at some point. But the next gen patches that I mentioned at the start of this dropped for the Series X and the PS5. And so the complete edition, not only having like these kind of cool new features and quality of life and stuff like that, but it also on my Xbox is a separate game.
Yep.
So
They
it's
somehow got away with it, those madmen.
all new achievements. Yep. So here I go again. So I actually started this playthrough when we were still streaming.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was streaming it for a little bit. And then when we kind of stopped doing that, I kind of fell off of it for a while. And then,
Because that was before the next gen patch had come out too.
yes, that was
Yeah.
before that. It was, and then the next gen patch was what got me to pick it back up. And then I was all in again. So somewhere in all of this, the first season of the Netflix show came out, and that made me want to, because I had bought all the books, but like sitting down and reading books is just, it's hard because it's like, this is the one thing you're doing right now. Like,
Yep.
you're putting everything else aside and you're just sitting here reading this book.
Yep.
So then I thought, what about audiobooks? So I listened to all the books for The Witcher, except for the first one that I had actually read between season 1 and season 2 of the show, which is why season 2 bummed me out so bad. Because I probably...
Because you knew all of the background lore that they were messing up in season 2.
Well, and I knew all the things that like could be, oh, that's going to be cool to see
Yeah.
on screen. Oh, that's going to be cool to see on screen. That'll be cool to see how they do that. Oh, they're not doing that. They didn't do any of that.
Yeah.
They immediately pivoted into something different and, in my opinion, worse. But what that did do, getting more familiar with the books, was this most recent playthrough has been really interesting. Seeing the nods and the like references, and like there will be names that like Geralt will just casually mention.
Yeah.
Like in Blood and Wine, for example, his vampire friend, when he mentions the guy that like nuked him,
Yeah.
it's like, oh, I've experienced that now. I know that event. Like I understand all of that happened there.
Yeah, because that's one of the most interesting things about these games to me is like canonically, don't the games like kind of pick up after the
Yes.
events of the books?
Yes.
And so like there were times playing through 2 and times playing through 3 where I was just like, it does very much that Star Wars thing to me, where, you know, like in Star Wars, they'll just throw out this name of like some random place, planet, thing. They never explain it. They never do it. It's just like, that is a thing.
yeah, it's out there somewhere.
It's out there somewhere. And to me, that makes the world feel like so much bigger than it actually
Yes.
is, because it's like they're all familiar with it. I don't need to know anything about it. It's just like kind of that organic world building that some people may not like, but
It makes it feel real.
Yeah.
It makes it feel like this world has existed without you this whole time, and now you're kind of coming into it, rather than like the whole world is framed around you and your experience as the player, and it
Yeah.
kind of feels like, you know, artificial.
exactly. Because it's like sometimes they'll just offhandedly mention, like Skellige to me is like
Yeah.
a huge part of it, where it's like they'll just like chit chat about like, oh yeah, all these, like I knew your dad and like blah blah blah, and it's like, oh okay,
Yeah.
maybe that's something from game 1 that I missed. No, it's from the books. Like Geralt does a bunch of stuff in the books, and if you read the books, I would imagine it's like, oh, that's cool, like I remember that. But if not, it's just like, oh yeah, this world feels lived in. I'm picking up this mantle of Geralt, versus like sometimes games fall into that, like if it didn't happen and you didn't do it, it's not going to be mentioned. It's not something that's like relevant to the game.
Yeah, and I think they did a really good job. It's kind of like, it's definitely a good example for anybody to look at that wants to kind of adapt another medium. Obviously, they kind of had to jump through a few hoops because, I guess, spoilers for the books, but like Geralt and Yennefer didn't survive. So like they jumped through a few hoops to like keep the story going.
Yeah.
And then there's also some things with certain characters, you know, like Triss is way bigger as far as like a romantic character in the games than she was in the books. Geralt actually had a fling with Fringilla.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like a pretty minor character in at least Witcher 3.
Yeah. Like I think I remember her some from the second game, but even then I don't feel like it was huge.
So yeah, there are some things that like, okay, we're going to let this slide because you've done so well for like 90% of this kind of continuity.
Yeah.
You can tell that, I mean, the fact that they're still doing like they did a next gen patch and they like added like show armor and stuff, and they tweaked quests that have been bugged for a long time that the community was always complaining about, and like just it's really cool to see the passion for the property that CD Projekt Red has and that they put into this game. And I think even though that I wasn't really aware of it at the time, that kind of shining through is what made this game so impactful and so important to me. That tied with just like where like time and place.
Yeah.
But because the game The Witcher, it's a big RPG, and with big RPG comes bugs and jank, and I mean like Roach is notoriously the worst horse in all of video games. But you can overlook some of those things because so much of what they did and is such high quality and like feels so cared about. Like I guess the kind of analogy I'm thinking of is like it was hand painted versus like made in like a factory or like, you know, mass produced kind of thing. And so I think that really shines through, and that was kind of what subconsciously I was appreciating about it at the time. And then as I've grown to broaden my gaming horizons and like think about and talk about them on a different or a deeper, a different and like a more consistent, you know, basis like we do now, I'm able to kind of like verbalize that and also recognize and be like, oh yeah, this is a lot of the things that make this game special that I maybe necessarily didn't like think that deeply about at the time. So we've kind of touched on it a little bit, but I guess we can talk about just the gameplay.
Yeah.
The overall structure. It's an open world RPG. You're running around, you're picking up quests, you're filling up a quest log.
Yeah. You're
banging out these quests, you're progressing the story, trying to ultimately, you know, get to your goal at the end. But
yeah, I just really like a lot of the loop of it. Cause like you said, it's open world RPG. You're running around doing this stuff, but like a lot of the side quests fall into like certain categories, you know?
Right.
And like one of the main things you end up doing in The Witcher, one of the main things that they like keep coming back to is the fact that you are a Witcher.
Right. That's your job in this world.
It's been a very long time since I played the second game, but I don't think you did a whole lot of witching in it. Like, right? Witchering?
No, I
like there were a couple of times you would like hunt down a monster.
Yeah, because
it was more political.
Yeah, in The Witcher 2, I feel like I tried to replay it again at one point, and I got into it a bit, but man, they're remaking 1, and I would love to see them remake 2 after that.
Yeah.
Because I think the story is really good.
Yeah. Because like 2, I remember like the politics between the elves and like the humans and like the dwarves and like all of that kind of stuff, but I only really remember like hunting down and fighting maybe a couple of monsters.
That's what I was going to say. Like in that first little village that you go to, there's kind of that thing in the river or in the pond that you have to like prep and fight. But yeah, the whole conceit of the game is that Geralt's been framed for the murder of a king. So it is very political.
Yeah. Whereas The Witcher 3 leans much more heavily into the fact that Geralt is a Witcher.
The Witcher 3,
political things going on because
Yes.
like, you know, we'll probably touch way more on that like in the story section that's got some spoilers in
Yes.
it. But like a lot of what you do in this game is like doing things a Witcher would do, where it's like you show up in town and like, yeah, you're looking for leads for Ciri or whatever, but it's also like, yeah, we'll help you, but like we got this other thing going on here that we need you to deal with. It's convenient that you're a Witcher because it's a monster.
Well,
and if you do
meanwhile,
that, we'll help you.
like the game also, unless you're on New Game Plus, like you're broke and stuff is really expensive early on. And so Witcher contracts are probably the easiest way to make money early on in the game. And so it's like, well, let me hit up this notice board, knock out a couple of these, monster hunts so that I can get some gold so that I can buy some of the things that I need or want. And I think the open world nature of this game allowed them to flesh a lot of that out because you can kind of just be a Witcher, whereas 2 was
more like open area
sort
of thing.
It was like you would go to an area and you could kind of explore it, but there were like loading screens and stuff. Like it was much more segmented, whereas this, like, you can just roll up to any random town, even if it's not required for the story, but it'll have like a notice board or something, and you can be like, hey, so you've got this problem with this monster. Tell me about it, and let's talk about my pay.
Yeah. And I just really liked that part of the gameplay loop where it's like, okay, I pick up this notice or, something that's like, yeah, like my wife got killed by this, creature from the woods and I want somebody to go deal with that or something like that. And so like you go and you talk to the guy and like it lets you ask him questions about like, well, what do you remember about the monster so that you can kind of like narrow it down. It's not like you having to decide what the monster was. Like at a certain point, Geralt will be like, oh, this sounds like a Leshy or whatever.
Right.
And so then it's like, oh, that was a Leshy. Now let me go into like my little book that Geralt has and like read up on like the Leshy and what it's weak to and what tactics to use against it. And so it's like, okay, now it's weak to this sign and I can use this like elemental or whatever oil to make my swords like do more damage, and it's weak to this kind of bomb, like so when it's using this move I can throw this bomb and that'll break it or whatever. Now granted, you don't have to do a lot of that prep work, like
especially
on the lower difficulties you
yeah.
can just kind of brute force your way through it with like just your basic silver sword. But going in and like, so you prep and then you use like your Witcher sight, which is kind of like your Batman vision or whatever from the Arkham games. And it's like you track down kind of clues and follow and find the monster in its lair and then you like attack it or whatever. And that loop just feels really good because it feels way more engaging than just like what they could have done, which is what a lot of other games of that genre kind of do, which is, hey, I need you to do this thing. You're going to like kind of fast track through a lot of the dialogue, but it's not really going to give you a whole lot of information or change anything about what you do. And then we're going to put like a little beep on your mini map and you're just going to run straight to it and it's going to take you directly to the monster. Whereas this, like they still put some like guidance on your mini map and whatever, but it guides you to like the area and then you have to track down in this huge area like where the monster actually is and that sort of a thing. And so it feels way more engaging and it feels much more like you're actually doing Witcher stuff versus I am just, the MMO like running to this location marked on my map,
killing rats, getting rat's tails. Yeah. And then on top of that, they already went the extra mile there where you're comparing it to other games, but then you go and the person says, this monster killed my wife or whatever. And then you go and you find the monster and it turns out it was actually like the wife's friend who is a werewolf and, changed accidentally or something like, and then you're faced with some sort of moral dilemma. Like I don't think that's an exact quest, but similar stuff to that happens like every time. Very rarely is it just point A to point B, kill the monster. And if it is, it's like, oh, turns out that this monster was was a woman who was abused in this village. And so now her ghost is like haunting the thing. And so I got to sever her tie to this world. And it's like, there's all this additional stuff that is helping flesh out the world. It
puts layers on the quest where it's not just like very rarely did I feel like there was this is a monster and it is just a monster. You know, like sometimes you'll run into like, oh, this is a griffin. Clearly it's a griffin. It's just a beast that is killing people. You know, like you'll definitely run into those. But oftentimes too, that like you're saying, there's like that layer there of like, well, this monster is also a person too.
Or like the people who hired you are just trying to cover up their mistake or their mess or nothing is ever quite just cut and dry, point A to point B. Then sometimes there's very obvious tells, like I'm thinking about that priest in Velen that like wants you to go burn bodies for him or something, and it turns out that they were dealing fist tech and killing people or something like that, and it's like, oh, I can be like, not my problem, pay me. Or I can be like, you know what, this world would be better without you in it. You know, that's a quest that, you know, you kind of see the twist coming, but there's so many quests that it's like, well, it's fine to have one that's a little bit more obvious because the next one you do is going to completely surprise you.
Yeah.
And these are just like basic side quests or Witcher missions. You get into the actual like
every single
story side quests, then it's like, it really goes, people always talk about the Bloody Baron. It's like one of those quests that just has kind of gone down in history as like, this is how you make a quest for a video game.
Yeah, because like all those side quests we were just talking about, like a majority of them that are just like basic side quests that are not part of a story or, you know, whatever. You get to it and you can just say no to every single one of them. Yeah. It's like, if I don't know who the person is that's going through the game as Geralt being like, nah, I don't feel like dealing with this, but like every single one of them has the option to just kind of be like, nah, I don't feel like I
not my
need
problem.
to do this. Yeah, not my problem. And so just the fact that you get in there and you basically want to do every single one of them because they feel so kind of rich in storytelling and just gameplay, to me means it's a good game.
Yeah, and I think you touched on a little bit, like just on pure gameplay. Like you don't have to engage with a lot of the systems in this game. Like I don't think I've ever really done anything with alchemy on any of my playthroughs.
Yeah.
But it's there if you want to play with it. The combat it feels fine when it felt way better than Witcher 2. Like Witcher 2 is awful compared to this. So coming from that game to this one, it was like, oh, this is great. It's an improvement. It's good now. It's serviceable. It does what it needs to do.
Yeah.
It would be an area where I'd love to see some improvement in whatever game they do next in this universe.
Yeah, because it's your basic
strong
light attack, heavy attack. You can interweave some like magic in there a little bit if you're kind of invested in that. You can interweave some like bombs or like your crossbow or whatever into it. But like for the most part, you're just spamming light attack or heavy attack based on whatever enemy that you're fighting.
Yeah. And you use the shield sign, Quen, and then you use maybe like whatever the situation calls for the other ones. But I feel like the combat is good enough that it doesn't necessarily detract from the experience, which for this game and what it's trying to do is good. Because even The Witcher 2, like I would say that's a good game. It's just really dated, but the combat was awful in that game. It was, especially going back to it now, it's like, wow. So yeah, Witcher 3's combat is, like you said, pretty basic, but good enough. As far as the gameplay, is there anything else that kind of stood out or that is worth mentioning here? It's mostly the combat, the like follow, like the investigation sections, and then like the dialogue choices. Yeah,
the one thing, and we kind of touched on it earlier, would be like the riding around on your horse part of the gameplay. It's passable, it's serviceable. I don't know how it was right when the game came out. I know Roach gets a lot of crap talked about her, but like I never had like a huge problem with Roach, but like it's you're riding along these roads and trying to follow like a line, but sometimes it's not like, it's realistic in that some of the roads don't look very much like roads and paths, and so like that can be a little bit of a problem. And then also like your horse kind of sticks to the road a little bit, but anytime you get into like a crossroads of any kind, it's just kind of a crapshoot of which way Roach is going to go.
No, it's not. Roach will always go the opposite direction that your waypoint is set. And
That's
I don't
okay,
know
that's fair.
why. Because, yeah, it's designed in kind of that way where, like, once you get Roach up to speed, if you're on the path, you can just hold the button down, she'll maintain speed, and it won't use her, like, stamina meter.
Yeah.
So you can kind of just put it on autopilot until you hit a fork in the road, because the horse will go the direction you don't want it to. And so you kind of have to be ready to steer the other way. Have you done any of the races?
I have. And I never really had any issues there. I mean, obviously the same problems of like the horse doesn't stick to the path you want it to apply, but it felt more reasonable there because if it wasn't, you would just spend the entire race holding down A. But it was always the kind of thing where I never felt like I was challenged in the races because I would just like get to the very end. Like I'd maintain kind of like a parity with whoever I was racing. And then I'd get to the end and I'd just spam A and I was just always faster. So
the races are fine because, you get ahead and then when you run out of stamina, you just block the path so they can't pass you and then you pick up speed again.
Yeah.
There's two problems with the horse that can really be frustrating there's one problem with the horse that can be really frustrating with the races, and that's when you have to cross a bridge.
Yeah.
Sometimes Roach just stops at a bridge for no reason. It just stops. It's just, I'm not going, and you have to like start up again. That's annoying in normal races. Most recent race I did was in Blood and Wine because that's where I am in my playthrough. And it's the one during the tournament, I don't know if you did it, where you have to like hit the dummies and shoot the targets.
Yep.
I did this stupid thing like 6 times because I could not hit the dummies.
Yep.
Finally looked it up and everybody online is just like, don't use your sword. Shoot everything with your crossbow because it will register the same way. Because the hit window is so weird for the dummies with your sword.
Yep.
So it's like everything kind of just surrounding the horse is a little janky, but
it in a lot of ways sometimes can feel like a Bethesda game to an extent where it's just kind of like, I see what you were going for and it didn't quite make it all the way there.
And I was kind of hoping they'd make Roach a little better in the next gen patch, but I guess it's like just a fundamental issue.
Like the programming of the horse just does that.
But I do think it's kind of funny that the community and like the developers have embraced Roach because like they put the card in Gwent that is Roach on the roof of the building and stuff. So I think that's pretty funny. At least they own it and like they're in on the joke at this point.
Yeah.
But I guess we can talk about Gwent since I mentioned it.
Yeah, because that's one of the other gameplay loops side quests is very early on you are introduced to this card game, Pokemon, or Gwent as they call it in this game.
Pokemon.
Basically, because you're just going around, you're collecting all these cards and...
I mean, you do that for every card game, right? Collect the cards.
Well, but I guess I'm thinking about it as like, it would be like if they played Pokemon in like the Pokemon TV show. They had these cards that's like, hey, it's me, Ash Ketchum.
Oh, yeah, because you can like get a Geralt card. Yeah, I thought that was always kind of funny.
Yeah, it's like, hey, you look a lot like some guy that I have a card of.
Yeah,
like,
exactly. Yeah,
so
that's all. Gwent is for the player.
Yeah.
Did they have some sort of like dice game or something in 2? I think they had some sort of game that
they definitely had a
nobody
game in 2.
ever
I don't remember it though.
Played, but like Gwent, man, it blew up even back when the game first launched. And obviously they made like a standalone game. They made Thronebreaker, which are all technically Gwent, but they like changed it because I mean you can break Gwent in The Witcher pretty like consistently. Like once you have the right cards for the deck, like you can almost always win. So it makes sense why they changed it in the standalone ones. But yeah, Gwent I love it in the Witcher game. I think it's hilarious how like I doubt Geralt would ever really walk into like just an armor shop and be like, you play Gwent, but it is kind of funny. I like that kind of, again, like the developers and the community are all kind of in on the joke.
Yeah.
That every NPC you can pretty much play Gwent with. Some of them it's just for like a little bit of money. Some of them you get like special cards. Then they have in every area there's like a fist fighting, a racing, and a Gwent kind of quest arc where you challenge 3 people to those different activities and then you fight like the champion. And then it all kind of culminates in like a Gwent tournament quest, which was really cool.
Yeah.
That you get an achievement if you actually, because you don't have to win the tournament to like finish the quest, but there is an achievement tied to winning the tournament as well, which is pretty cool. But yeah, Gwent, basically, yeah, you have your deck of cards and you play against somebody else and you're trying to have the highest power and win 2 out of 3 hands. So sometimes it makes sense to like retreat and lose one of the rounds so that you can come back stronger for the next one. It was pretty unique. It was a cool, quick little card game that was like simple enough to learn that like I got into, because most of the time in like these RPG games, when we did our Horizon Forbidden West episode, we were making fun of the game they had in that game, because most of the times it's like I have no desire to engage with this, but they found a good balance with Gwent.
Yeah, like a lot of times it's the type of thing where you do it once when they introduce it to you, and then you're kind of like, all right, well, if I ever am like really hard up on cash, maybe I'll do this again or something. But Gwent was like, you're right, it had like that simplicity, but also like enough strategy there to make it kind of interesting. But it also like made it easy enough that like it was pretty easy to get like a pretty good deck and feel like, oh, I'm doing some cool stuff here. And I'm collecting all these various cards in order, like, you know, they had a few different like factions, like they had the Northern Realms and they had the Monster faction, and then they had like
the Scoia'tael and the
Nilfgaardian.
Yeah, the Nilfgaardians, yep. And then they added Skellige in Blood and Wine and made you play with Skellige, I think.
Which was the only time that I didn't really enjoy a ton of Gwent, was when they forced me to play with a deck that I didn't really have cards for yet.
I thought it was cool from the perspective of you've probably mastered it at this point, and so we're going to kind of make you restart. And I do remember, I've only played through Blood and Wine all the way once, but I remember thinking like this deck is pretty cool, but you gotta get the cards.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. But it's a cool little game, and like there's a reason to keep playing it, I guess, beyond just like, I guess a lot of games that throw those in, it is kind of like, okay, you can get some money for it, but it's never enough money to really make it worth it. And like in The Witcher, it's like, oh, but I'm like getting cards, and I'm like, there's quests tied to this versus.
Well, it goes back to that kind of world building, and like it feels like Gwent is part of this world, even if like, yeah, the cards are the people of the world, which is kind of silly, but it's like, thinking about, obviously I mentioned the tournament quest.
Yeah.
But like there's that quest with Zoltan in Novigrad where he like owes somebody money. So his plan is to get these rare Gwent cards and then sell them, you know, for the money. And so it's like the characters and the people of this world, like they play Gwent, you know, it's a thing. And even if it's like, because in most games like Horizon, like you walk into a town, there's the one person in this one spot that plays the game that you can go interact with, and other than that, like nobody talks about it, references it, anything. It's referenced and talked about in quests where you're not actually even actively playing it. It's like, oh, this is just part of this world, and it's fun, and it has that like catchy music, which I think is a good transition to the music of this game, which
great.
Excellent. Again, they set a standard. Yeah. Because I remember playing like Assassin's Creed Odyssey after The Witcher came up, being like, there's definitely some Witcher vibes in here. They just, some of the vocal performances and the instruments they use, like it has, like you hear it and it's instantly like, oh, that's The Witcher. It takes you right back.
Well, and they leaned pretty heavily into like sort of the Nordic, Polish folk music, which was really cool. Because The Witcher is written by a guy from Poland, right?
Yep. And CD Projekt Red is a Polish studio.
Yeah. And so they leaned into a lot of that, which feels really good in the game. You know, like when you get into the battle music and it gets all intense and there's some like Polish woman singing, it feels epic.
Yeah.
So,
and there's definitely some songs that have been memed, but there's also there's some songs that I'll hear and they're just like, some of the more like the Skellige music when you're just like exploring. that will always kind of just hit me right in the gut with like nostalgia and just like that kind of melancholy vibe that it has. And then there's some songs that just like will instantly get me pumped.
Yeah.
And like this game obviously is very up there, very important to me. So like the music is just like an emotional conduit anyways.
Yeah.
And so the music for this game is, and it's got a little bit of everything, because like when I'm doing homework and stuff, I can throw on like a meditate study with The Witcher, whatever, and it's like the kind of calm, like chill stuff. But then there's like the get pumped music, like the track that I played when we did our music episode a while back with Abby and Aubrey.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was very kind of unique, and I guess probably that Polish influence, because we don't get a lot of that in games. And so it really kind of stood out. And then, yeah, you can definitely feel the influence it has had on like video game music, especially like RPG and like fantasy kind of games since it's come out.
Yeah.
I guess that's pretty much all I've got. If you're ready to roll into spoiler talk, and we can talk about some story stuff.
Yeah, no, I think we're good to roll into the more spoiler heavy section. So if you haven't played The Witcher, haven't finished The Witcher, and you don't want to be spoiled, take a break.
Yeah, so yeah, exactly. The way this will work is I'll have timestamps in the description. So if you want to come back for our verdicts, we'll have the timestamps there, so you can skip ahead to that and then completely avoid spoilers. Because the way I'm kind of seeing this going is we're just going to talk about like our thoughts on some story moments and the writing and stuff. We're not going to break down like the plot of the game beat by beat. So we'll have some Witcher 3 music like what we just talked about here, and when we come back it will be full spoilers. So we are back, full spoiler mode. I guess I kind of put these 3 bullet points in here. Who did you romance?
I went with Triss.
Every time?
Well, I've only really played the game once.
True. You did restart it, though.
I did restart it, and I still stuck with Triss. Like, I didn't, the first time I played through before restarting, like, I didn't actually ever find Yennefer. Like I got to Skellige and basically was like,
oh right, I was like, well, you find her in White Orchard, but yeah, no, I see what you mean. Like, you never got to like her section of the game. Right?
Yeah. And so up until that point, I had only met Triss, and having only played a little bit of 1, all of 2, which Yennefer was not in,
right,
and then the 3rd game.
You were much more connected. I was
much more connected to Triss. And having not read any of the books, I didn't know any of Geralt and Yennefer's backstory.
Right.
It was, like, to me, it was just like, hey, here are these 2 equal people that Geralt knows. Which one do you like better? Versus now, like, having watched the show, and I have read the original book, The Last Wish, and then I've heard about a lot of the other books and the story from you.
Yeah.
So it definitely does seem like if you want the canon choice, it is Yennefer.
Yeah.
But me personally, I really enjoyed Triss as a character. Like, yeah, even now, like having made the Triss choice, like Yennefer still kind of seems like a kind of selfish, self-centered person. When I was introduced to like the choice of like, do you like Triss or do you like Yennefer? It's like, hey, do you like this person who you've known for 3 games? Or do you like this person who has been missing, didn't bother to tell you what she's been up to, and just kind of expects you to get over it when you meet her? Like, which one do you want to go with? And I was like, definitely the one who's been there for me the entire time. So,
yeah, the one who was there for you the entire time, knowing that you were.
Yeah, I mean, yes, I found that out later.
Yennefer. Yeah.
I didn't realize that Geralt had a history with Yennefer until after a lot of that.
Did you do like the romance quests with like Kira and Shani and some of them as well? Or were you like, no, I'm being true to to Triss the whole time?
Um,
Because I do it all because I just want to see all the content for one thing. But
yeah.
I will say, I think on this most recent playthrough, I did with Kira, I did like the dinner thing with her, but just as like friends, you can kind of cut it off before you, and she still ends up somehow knocking you out, or you just fall asleep looking at the stars or something.
Yeah.
And then go into the next part of the quest. But
now, does that screw up her showing up at Kaer Morhen, or does...
No.
Okay. Yeah.
No.
I don't remember what I did with Kira because that was a long time ago.
Yeah, true.
And then Shani, I did follow that storyline through because I researched and I was like, oh, okay, this doesn't like change. Like this,
it
is
doesn't
set
actually
as a
affect,
separate thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Like this is not actually its thing.
Also, the romance things you can do in Hearts of Stone and Blood and Wine are so much more kind of unique.
Yeah,
It feels like than the ones in the base game.
Yeah. Because like Shani, it's not actually like Geralt, is it? Or it kind of becomes Geralt towards the very end.
Yeah, it's Geralt at the end because it'd be kind of creepy.
Yeah, like some guy possesses Geralt, basically. Like that's
Right.
the deal for him helping you, is he possesses you to go with Shani to a wedding.
Yeah,
And so like that's the whole romance thing, is like you wandering around this wedding as Geralt possessed by a dude. So
Yeah, except that, yeah, I think there's some implied history, like the conversations you've had before you're possessed.
Yeah. like Shani.
You know Shani, and there's already been a little bit of like flirting and
Yeah.
and her being like making a few remarks, and then when you are possessed, she'll ask to talk to Geralt and be like, I want to talk to Geralt now, and then that's when you have the opportunity to be like, well, when he said that thing, I didn't totally disagree. And so
Yeah.
it's not like Geralt has no agency. It is, I guess it sounds kind of like creepier talking about it than when you actually witness it. But then when the guy that's possessed is gone, then you have like a long conversation with her where you can kind of follow that thread, or you can be like, yeah, that was all him. I don't want to go any further. But so that's unique. The one in the Blood and Wine is unique, but they even got more creative in like the sex scenes and stuff, where a lot of the ones in the base game are just like the same thing, kind of copy pasted.
Yeah.
And so it was like I think in Blood and Wine, you're flying through the clouds.
Yeah, it's
with
like a
the girl
fantasy land or whatever.
Yeah. So it's like there's stuff in there that I want to see that's like weird and unique. And so I kind of did. I've obviously done it all at this point, but my first playthrough, I think I went with Triss for the exact same reasons as you. Hadn't read the books yet. I knew Yennefer, like I knew there was history, but man, Triss is just, in the game, she's great. She's a really cool character. She's cute. She's like you there for Geralt, helps him out, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And
seems like she cares about people.
Yeah.
Unlike Yennefer.
Even on this most recent playthrough that I'm going canonical, it was really hard to like not follow the romance all the way through during Triss's part, where I was like, oh nope, I'm not gonna kiss you here, or whenever she like falls in your arms. And, because it kind of,
because that's the thing too, is like the game does Triss's whole like storyline before you ever meet Yennefer, like ever get to Yennefer. And so it's like, if you're not paying attention, or if you don't know Yennefer's coming up and that you want to romance Yennefer, the game almost pushes you into like, hey, here's this person who's clearly into you. You either have to like let them down or you have to be like, no, you're really cool, I'm into you too.
But doing that, turning her down, because I've done a Yennefer playthrough before, but it's been a while. But like doing it, for one thing, I think there's a lot of really cool stuff with Yennefer and Geralt, like the way that her romance quest with him and stuff.
Like having done that, even going with Triss is cool.
Bringing the last wish thing like back around and all that. That's really cool. And like, Yennefer, she's very kind of abrasive, obviously, and she has like this personality, but like that core family triangle of like Yennefer, Geralt, and Ciri, like, it's cool to see that all kind of come together in the end. That makes the most sense. But man, if you let Triss down and then you let her get on the boat, she basically becomes like one of the sidest of side characters after that. And it's really kind of like,
Yeah,
depressing.
It really does feel like the people at CD Projekt Red like Triss a lot more.
Yeah, especially their like version of her. Because once if she gets on the boat, she'll still come back to Kaer Morhen and she'll still fight with you and stuff, but you have like just brief conversations with her and and then it all comes back around in Blood and Wine, because basically whichever person you choose is the one that ends up kind of coming to your winery and like living with you there and retiring with you. And so the first time I ever did it, it was Triss, and this time it'll be Yennefer. But yeah, I thought that was just kind of an interesting way, I guess, to kick off the spoilers.
Yeah.
Because it is a big kind of core component to the game. You talk about the characters and the writing, and that affects relationships too. Like, these are some of the best and most well-written kind of video game characters ever. And, do they sexualize them? Yes. But they're also like, the women in this game are very well-rounded, well-written. Like, it's not just the damsels in distress. It's not just
like it.
And they
like
feel
you
like
say
real
they sexualize
people.
them, but not in like, to me, it didn't necessarily feel like a creepy way. It was always kind of like a.
No, I guess I'm thinking of like the bonus dress for Triss that they put in there, that like it's like a V cut that like goes down to her belly button or whatever. It's like,
I thought that looked dumb, so I didn't put her in.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense for story wise, which is why it's like, okay, this feels kind of like, in a lot of ways, some of the like stuff like that comes up feels natural to the world and makes sense. This felt like the developers being like, hey, you want to see some skin? And it's like, I mean, kind of, but it's also a little creepy. Like, you gave the other female characters like outfits that still made sense. This is like Triss in Novigrad is kind of undercover trying to help all these mages and
what if she wore a very
stuff.
Loud dress?
What if she's wearing like this over the top like ball gown thing? So, but the characters in this game, and it's something that we brought up when we talk about Cyberpunk too, especially when Cyberpunk was getting so bashed and nobody was appreciating the stuff they did good about it. It's like CDPR is good at writing characters. Granted, they had some legwork done for them in The Witcher, but they kind of took them all to a new level and made
like it's an interesting, because it feels like they are taking the characters from the books, but it also feels like they did their own thing with them too.
Well, it is their own thing to a certain extent, but also it's like it has to be different because it's a video game and you're going to engage with them and make choices around them. But it's like Dandelion, obviously Dandelion.
Yeah.
Zoltan is Zoltan. Like, these are the characters, which I think was kind of smart, taking it out of the books. And they had to do a little bit of like gymnastics and to like set this up. But now it's Geralt, but he's had all these other experiences. And now he's at this point in his life. So it makes sense that maybe he would do things slightly differently than he did in the book when he was, and like Ciri, I mean, she's a kid in the books for most of it. So they got to kind of invent adult Ciri.
Yeah. So it definitely helps in a lot of ways, because a lot of the differences can be explained away by like, well, now Geralt's had like 20 more years of experience or 30 more years of experience or whatever it is. Like, that's like, you knew him in the book. If you read the books, he was super into Yennefer. He's now had 30 more years of Yennefer kind of just being a bitch to him. And like, maybe he's a little sick of it. Maybe he's like, you know what? Triss has always been nice. Triss cares about people besides herself and Ciri.
Well, and like I mentioned in the books, he even has like a serious kind of relationship with Fringilla for a while. And it's because he and Yennefer's relationship is always kind of, and that the games kind of stayed true to it, but it's like, it's always kind of this up and down thing. It's this weird, like, we're super in love and now we're like separated and now we're in love. And
it's a very toxic relationship, and they don't hide the fact that it's a bit toxic. Like,
no, and like, I like how a lot of the NPCs will just like kind of throw it in Geralt's face and like bring it up and be like, it's just part of this world and this story.
Yeah. And like, me not having read the books until like after I've finally playing the Last Wish mission. Basically, it was like, oh, this makes so much more sense now.
Right.
I don't want to spoil too much of that, but like, what if you find Geralt and Yennefer's relationship weird and then you play, because either way, you kind of have to play the Yennefer romance mission. Like, you get to the end of it and you get to make the decision of, like, even if you've romanced Triss already, you get to the end of the Yennefer mission and you kind of get to say, like, actually, I was wrong, yes, and or no, sort of thing. And so it's like getting through that part, I was like, this makes so much more sense as to their relationship and everything that's gone on.
Yep.
I understand it more now. And I think I made the right decision. So
yeah. I mean, I probably, like, my heart will always go Triss.
Yeah.
But I definitely see the merit and the value, especially if you have, like, all the context for a Yennefer playthrough. And then if after the last wish, she's still a bitch, especially to, like, everybody else.
Yeah.
But I feel like after that, her and Geralt seem more like in tune.
Yeah.
Which was a good way to ride it.
Yeah. Well, and it's like we talked about earlier, where it doesn't feel like one is the obvious right choice.
Mm-hmm.
Either way that you play it, either way that you do it, feels like they thought about it, put care into it, put care into a thing that, like, I don't know what the, like, percentages are of people that pick Yennefer or Triss. Let's just say 50-50. Like, they put a bunch of care into things that, like, half the people maybe aren't even going to see.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. Well, and that's true for a lot of this game. And that's a good transition into, like, what endings did we get? I feel like we'll talk about the endings and the kind of overarching story, and then maybe go back and mop up any other things we want to mention. But the basic idea is Geralt got his memory back from the second game. So now he's looking for Yennefer. He finds Yennefer really quickly.
Yep.
And then she tells him, Ciri's back and her dad wants us to find her. And her dad is the Emperor of Nilfgaard, which is the kingdom that is, like, just destroying, like, taking over the world. I shouldn't say destroying, but just, like, capturing and taking over the world.
And they're not presented as, like, these evil people, but they're also not presented as good people. Like,
no,
it's a very gray, like, it's not as clean cut as, like, Star Wars, where the Empire is clearly evil and like the rebels are clearly good. It's like, they're one of the absolute worst characters in the game is part of the North, which is what Nilfgaard is currently attempting to take over.
Yeah, you're talking about Radovid?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then also, like, Nilfgaard is also causing all of this death and destruction, and you see the constant, like, civilians that are being displaced and have issues because of Nilfgaard, and not all of the Nilfgaardians are great either.
Yeah, it's, like, weird. People are people.
It's which I appreciate, again.
Yeah, I think a lot of that coming into this game the first time is a lot to track and keep up with. And, like, my first playthrough or something was just like, I like the Witcher stuff. And then as I've gotten, more educated and invested in the universe, the more you know about it, it's like the more CDPR is put in there for you. And so that's...
Yeah, like, it definitely is a game that feels like you could step into it without having played The Witcher 1 or 2, without knowing really anything about The Witcher. And then every piece of Witcher content, besides maybe the second season of the TV show, according to you, that you engage with beyond that will give you a deeper appreciation for the game.
Right.
I think The Witcher season 2 on Netflix wasn't terrible. It wasn't great.
It won't enrich your knowledge of the rest of the universe because it's completely different. But
yeah. Well, you will see characters in it that are in the game.
Right.
They aren't necessarily the characters you will meet in the game. In my opinion, the characters from the game are a little bit better, but maybe some of that's, like, anchoring bias where I met them first. So I think Eskel from the game is way cooler.
Yeah. But so, the story, basically, Geralt, his quest is to find Ciri, and so he investigates all over the world, finally does end up tracking her down, then has a battle against the Wild Hunt at Kaer Morhen, and then after that...
Because they are also tracking her down. Yeah, like, that's the main reason he has to find her, right?
Well, that's the main reason, that she pops back up in the world because she can travel through dimensions, and so she pops back up in this world, and that triggers the Wild Hunt because they can track that magic. And so when they come back, I'm not sure that Amir really gives a crap about the Wild Hunt. He just wants his daughter because of that's, like, his heir.
Yeah.
in the books, he wants her so that he can have a baby with her.
Yeah, he's a creep.
Yeah. So anyways, but Yennefer and everybody else, like in your group, knows that the Wild Hunt is after her. And so they're like, we have to get to her first. And so they know once they find her that the hunt is going to come after him. So they set up this fight. You have this big battle. Ciri is very upset because Vesemir ends up dying. And also she's just tired of like this stuff happening because of her. So.
Because she's magic.
Yeah, because she's very special magic.
Yeah. It's not common in this world.
Yeah, like her magic, she travels through dimensions. Like she is the Lady of the Lake in like the King Arthur story.
Yeah.
Because she can like travel through, like she goes to the cyberpunk world. Like there's all these kind of like the King Arthur stuff is in the books. The cyberpunk stuff, that was CD Projekt Red. But
yeah.
So then after all this, there's Avallac'h who's there, who's an elven like sage from the same race of elves as the Wild Hunt. And he's basically trying to get her on board with ushering in the White Frost. Or
there's basically some big apocalyptic event that is coming because of her, or that only she can stop, or something like that.
It's coming no matter what. It's just the prophecy, and I think she can stop it. And so he's trying to like get her on board to stop it, but to do that, there's a good chance she won't survive.
Yeah.
So you end up fighting the Wild Hunt at the very end, and you're victorious, but then you realize that Avallac'h had his secondary motivations, that he was working in the background while you were fighting. You rush up, you're going to kill him, but then Ciri pops up and she's like, no, I want to do this. It's my choice. And at that point, it's like all the decisions you've made regarding her, and including some of the things you say to her in that moment, will affect if she survives, and then if she does survive, what happens after. And so like there are a few endings where she dies, or where you take her back to a mirror and you get paid like a ridiculously small amount for it. It's kind of a meme in the community.
Yeah.
They did increase that amount in the next gen patch to make it less silly. Or the best ending, in my opinion, is that she fakes her death and becomes a Witcher with Geralt. And so I'm assuming you probably got that ending.
Yeah, that was the ending that I got. I don't necessarily know that it would be the canon ending, but it definitely feels like the canon ending that CD Projekt Red wanted you to get to, because it's a lot of it's based on like how good a dad you were to Amir, or to Ciri.
Ciri, yeah.
And so it's like, if you were like a good dad to Ciri, that's kind of the ending it funnels you to. If you were kind of a crappy dad to Ciri, she's either going to die or she's going to go with her other dad who doesn't really care what she wants.
And she's going to become like the Empress of Nilfgaard. Yeah. And I like that. So there are some people who complain, there's like some minor complaints that, a lot of the ending with Ciri's story specifically is just tied to some of the stuff after the battle, where it's like, you have these little moments with Ciri where you can be a good dad, or you can just be kind of oblivious, or you can just downright be like selfish. And that's what triggers the ending. I like that. I think it's really cool, because it goes back to that core relationship of like their family. And I think that's one of the most kind of important things of the story.
Yeah. Well, and it's one of those things too, where people will always complain about endings that are like that, because they don't understand game design, and because they don't understand that they would be pissed off if a decision they made in the first 5 minutes of the game got them an ending they didn't like 40 hours in. Because the same thing with Mass Effect, same thing with a bunch of stuff where it's like, it's a lot easier to like have things influence, but then at the very end, like kind of let you influence it a little bit further to nudge it the way that you want it to, versus, hey, everything everywhere that you've done up in this game changes the ending, which, don't get me wrong, would also be cool. But I feel like a lot of the people who claim they want that would not like that.
Well, and there's a couple things, touching on that you only really interact with Ciri for like the back quarter of the game anyways, because most of the game
catch up with her until...
is looking for her. The other thing is, those things affect the big ending with Geralt and Ciri. But there's a ton of stuff throughout the game along the way that affects the state of the world when the game wraps up. Like,
exactly.
Did Nilfgaard win? Did they not? Like, those kind of things are impacted by quests and things, decisions you made a long time ago. So there's kind of a little bit of column A, column B in this game.
Exactly.
But yeah, I got that ending too. I think I've gotten that ending every time because I just can't not be a good dad to Ciri. I've watched some of the other endings and things like that just to see them. But I'm like, this is, like you said, this is the canon ending. This is the happy ending. This is what Geralt and Ciri deserve.
Yeah.
This is in a world that rarely actually has happy endings. This is a nice little kind of happy ending. It's like, you know, Mir gets screwed over. He doesn't get what he wants, which is great because he's a dick. And Geralt and Ciri get to be together, which is great because they've had such a weird life, not to mention all of the CDPR content, like they've been separated. And so, and then depending on which sorceress you end up with, like you eventually settle down with them. And so, it's a really good ending that fits and makes sense, even if it is a little bit on the happier side for this universe.
Yeah. Well, and I appreciate that about it too, because like there are a lot of games in sort of like the more grim, dark fantasy settings.
Right.
That is, you know, like the end will have, you know, I guess I think about the Plague Tale games where it's like, that's a very grim, dark, like fantasy setting. And the ending of that game, spoilers, is very grim dark, where it's like, it's a victory, but it's one that like still feels bad to get.
Yeah, it came at a cost.
Yeah. Whereas this one, it's like, I appreciate the fact that these games recognize that they are games, that we are playing them for a power fantasy, that we are playing them to have fun. And sometimes that means that in the face of all of these terrible things or morally gray things or just kind of the grimdark setting that it is, there can still be that little like happy ending at the very end, you know? Like I appreciate that. And any ending that Radovid dies in is like still a pretty good ending to me.
Yeah. Touching on that, I mean, like the actual core material that this is based on has a pretty not happy ending in the books. And so it is kind of nice to see this, this little bow put on it. Is there anything else that like jumps out at you while we're in spoilers that you wanted to touch on? Like obviously we mentioned Bloody Baron. That quest will forever be burned in my mind with just the botchling and everything that happens in that quest. And
just like that's a super good quest.
It goes on long enough that like, you meet the Baron, you have some thoughts about him initially, and then you realize, oh, he's kind of a terrible person. And then you meet the daughter, and then, it pulls you in all sorts of different directions, not to mention the stuff with the crones and the children and all that that's kind of intertwined with it.
Yeah, which ends up being a way bigger part of the game than I would have thought because...
Yeah, well, I've heard people call the Bloody Baron like a side quest, but it's core content. Like you have to, like you're helping him to get information about Ciri. So it's like...
Well, and the crones are at the end of the game too, right?
Yeah, you kill 2 out of 3 of them.
Yeah.
Well, if you're a good dad.
Well, yeah.
You can tell Ciri, no, we're not going over there. But so that quest, I mean, the moment that like the botchling crawls out of the ground and it's like just everything that represents and what you have to do with it and what the Baron has to do with it is just like, I have never seen any, like usually when you hear mature in a game, especially at this point in like gaming and where I was, it's like, you think Call of Duty, lots of shooting people up. You think Grand Theft Auto, lots of cussing, lots of like drugs, boobs, like juvenile mature. This level of mature of like, we're touching on the themes of like miscarriage and abuse and like alcoholism and probably PTSD and like just everything that goes into this quest. And then the fact that it's like, we're also not doing it in a way that like fades to black or cuts away. Like you're going to see this botchling. You're going to see the Baron pick it up and carry it back and bury it. Like that kind of, I think that is the quest that people that got to that point were like, oh, this game is something like it's on another level because it's relatively early on. It's like you go to Velen after the tutorial area.
Yeah. And you can either get there like 5-10 hours in, or you can get there like 45 hours in. It depends on how distracted you get.
Yeah. But are there any others that kind of jump out at you?
This is like DLC, but I really liked the Hearts of Stone stuff and like Gaunter O'Dim
Oh,
And,
yeah.
like, that was all super cool.
The like deal with the devil kind of stuff.
Yeah. Like kind of a weird, like, you make a wish sort of thing.
Right.
And then it's like, oh, that backfired. Let's like fix this sort of like storyline. And just like Gontaro Dim being one of like the first people you meet in the game and how they set all of that up was really cool. So I thought that was, I liked that a lot. We already touched on like the Bloody Baron and the Crowns. Skellige was cool. I liked the fact that you could kind of like try to help influence like
Right.
who got the throne based on who you liked best. So
yeah, Skellige, like aesthetically, I think is my least favorite.
I just don't like the fact that there are like 15 different islands that you have to like travel between all the time.
Yeah, that was the other thing I was going to say, is that the traversal really impedes my enjoyment, because you can buy maps that will like just unlock fast travel for you, which is great.
Yeah.
But if you need to like not like travel by horse, like there's so many mountains and hills, and you get halfway there and you realize, oh, I needed to go the other side of this mountain to get there. I do like, there's the quest that you do with Ceres that is where she's trying to help Udalric, who's like possessed by that shadow creature. And the way to like successfully do it is to throw his baby in an oven.
Yeah.
And yeah, the first time I did that, like I didn't know what was going to happen. I was just kind of like, well, I'm going to just kind of trust
it's a trick.
you.
It's a trick, by the way, people. You're not actually killing a baby.
Yeah. So the whole idea is the thing feeds on grief.
Yeah.
And Udalric is grieving his brother's death. And so Ceres comes in and throws this baby in the oven, which makes you feel bad for what you did. And so then the thing is going to try to come out at you.
Yeah. But
then she pulls out that there was like a door on the other side of the oven. The baby was never in there. So she shows you that. And then that makes it to where I wish I could remember what the creature was called, but it doesn't have anywhere to go. It lost its host.
Yeah.
And then it has to leave. So it was like, that stuff was like really cool. Like those kind of shocking moments. And again, that's kind of like, if you tiered the content, that would be a main side quest, if that makes sense. Cause like it has to do with the kind of main cast of characters, but it's still side content. You could skip all that altogether.
Yeah. I really liked going like after the Bloody Baron, you go into, I forget, Oxenfurt, or is it the other one? Novigrad.
Yeah.
And so they are currently like cracking down on all like witches and wizards and like non-humans basically. So it's like not a fun time going around, but that's where you find Triss. And so like you're at that point you kind of turn into like a rebel freedom fighter trying to like help these people like get out of town and like take down the witch hunters or whatever, like Radovid's witch hunters that are doing all of this. And you eventually start working with Dijkstra, who I really like. I like Dijkstra as a character.
Oh, Dijkstra's a great character.
And eventually, like, you hook back up with, like, Vern and Roach and, like, that group of people that if you played the second game, they were people that you could, like, do a bunch of stuff with, depending on which path you chose.
Yeah, which I didn't.
Yeah.
I went Yorvik.
But I at least recognized who they were.
Oh, yeah.
And I like them as characters as well. They're pretty cool. And so, like, you kind of go in and you're, like, almost doing the thing you were accused of doing in the second game. Like, you're actually doing it in the third game.
Yeah.
So...
Yeah, because, like, Dijkstra and Roach and Taller, they want to get rid of Radovid. But then it's when you kind of bring Philippa into the mix that it's like, oh, no, this is actually going to happen because, like, she wants revenge. Like, for her, it's personal. For them, it's political.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, you're kind of just... You're a part of it because you had a quest from Radovid to find Philippa, so you have that connection with him already. Yeah. And you did that quest way earlier in the game.
Yeah.
And then it comes back and ties into this. Yeah, it's all, there's so many really great quests, and there's so many like really great just little quests and little nods. And like I did a quest in Toussaint recently. It's like it's in the kind of beginning part where you come up on this guy and he's like, hey, you did something for me in the past. I never paid you back, so what I did instead was I put the money that I owed you in this bank account.
Yeah.
And it's been collecting interest. So all you have to do is go get it. And I'm sure it's like, a sizable chunk by now. And the quest is literally like Geralt goes to DMV.
Yeah.
like you go to the window to talk, they tell you to go get this other form. You go to the other window, the lady's like, oh no, you need this other form to get that form. So then you go upstairs to talk to that guy, and he's like, I can't help you yet. So you go back down, then she's on break.
Yep.
And so then this guy, you can play Gwent with him, and he's like, if you're just nice to her and maybe show her a little bit of like affection, or that you see her as a person, maybe you'll get a little bit further. So then Geralt kind of like flirts with the lady behind the window, and then she's like, oh yeah, I can help you. Yeah. And then the like owner of the bank comes, and it turns out that like he had taken the money because they didn't think Geralt was ever going to come get it or whatever. So then because
Geralt's got like an unnaturally long life as well, so they assumed he was dead.
Yeah, so then you tell him like, I want my money in a week or I'm going to kill you.
Yeah.
And then you wait a week, and in game time and you get your money. But I was like, these little things, it's like, it's so ridiculous, but it's memorable.
Yeah. Well, and I remember a quest from Tucson where it's like there's this bird lady.
Yeah. I just recently did that one too.
Yeah, where she's like turns into a bird or something like that.
Yeah, she was cursed, and like she turns into she's a bird woman, but she's eventually going to just straight up be full bird.
Yeah, and like this guy loves her, and so there's something to do where like you get the choice to either like say, oh, it sucks, or like try to break the curse, or let him take on the curse for her so she's freed or whatever. And so it's a cool quest.
I'm trying to remember how I did that one the first time, because I thought this quest was really unique, especially in the modern, like if you look at it through a modern lens, because essentially this guy's a stalker.
Yeah.
But in like these days, like the whole purpose of being a knight was to like win the affections of a lady. And so it's like,
well, and he was like stalking her, but also she was intentionally she didn't want anyone finding out she was a bird lady.
Right.
Like a bird werewolf.
So he's like, I know something's up. Can you look into it? And I looked into it. And then the way I kind of played out the quest this most recent time was that basically we decided to lift the curse, which meant we would have to like kill a baby bird or whatever. And then, but she would only have like 7 years because she would take on the bird's life.
Yeah.
And so she would only have like 7 years left to live, but she wouldn't be cursed. So she took that option. And actually there's a cool video by Exlatalis, who's this guy that like just breaks The Witcher and like finds really cool stuff or whatever. He's found her body.
Oh, wow.
Like 7 years later or something.
Yeah.
Which is just crazy that they do that. But
right.
But the way the quest kind of played out, just with me like naturally responding, was me and her basically both kind of got tired of his shit.
Yeah.
And like ended up kicking him out of the tent. Like he showed up when we didn't want him there. And she was like, I can't believe you told him. And Geralt's like, I didn't tell him. So then she's mad because he's just butting in.
Yeah.
Then I'm mad as Geralt because it's like, I had this under control. Why are you butting in? And so in the end, like she was free, didn't want anything to do with him. And Geralt at the end of the day was like, look, just because you like someone doesn't mean that they have to like you back. And then it kind of like, I got my money, but he got the relationship with that character and Geralt was done. Like,
yeah,
he didn't like Geralt anymore. And I was like, it's kind of interesting because I probably in 2016 or whatever was like, oh, this dude loves her, wants to help. And I followed that thread of like, let's do it that way. And so it's just kind of interesting how these things can play out differently like that.
Yeah, because there's a bunch of different options with it, and all of them
they all make sense,
fleshed out.
Yeah,
they make sense, and it's not like you may not necessarily like the outcome, but it's not like picking certain outcomes has less. It's not like they looked at it and were like, okay, well, most people are going to pick this, so we're going to put the most effort into this outcome.
Yeah.
And the fewest number of people will probably pick this outcome, so we're just going to kind of be like, fades to black, here's like a little summary of what would have happened sort of thing. You know, like every single outcome feels like they put the same amount of effort into it, which is really cool.
Yeah.
So
I think the last thing I'll kind of touch on here is just that it would have been cool if The Witcher 2 had been more impactful on The Witcher 3 story, because there's a lot of stuff that just gets like retconned or brushed over. Or
there's like a whole dragon lady in The Witcher 2 that you never hear about again.
Yep. And like you never hear from Yorvith, who in my opinion was the cooler path when compared to Roach. You do get some stuff with Letho.
Yeah, it does feel like Yorvith would have played some sort of a role in the third game with everything that's going on.
I think that's one of those things that like just didn't, like, they ran out of time type thing. I don't think it was that they intended to cut him out, but yeah, that's a pretty common complaint from like Witcher fans, is that 2 should have impacted 3 more. But then there was also the thing of like, they knew 3 was going to be a jumping on point for a lot of people. So how much, you're already bringing a lot of like just kind of general baggage, but how much specific previous game baggage do you want to bring on?
And it was during that time too, that was kind of that weird, like, you know, the Mass Effect games, all 3 of those came out on the 360. And so it was a lot easier for them to create some system where it looked at your previous saves and figured out what you did, versus The Witcher 2 and 3, where The Witcher 2 came out on the 360, The Witcher 3 came out on the Xbox One. And so like, it couldn't easily necessarily look back at your save and like pull from that, which is almost how you would have, because like,
right,
yeah, you could do something where you answer the questions, which I think is kind of what you do.
That's what they did,
but they do it in such a way that's like, I don't really understand what I'm answering here. But also like The Witcher 2 varied drastically at like at least a couple of points in the game based on who you sided with.
Oh, so, yeah, exactly.
Depending on, it would have been very difficult to pull that into the game without it looking at your save easily, or without you just answering a checklist that was very obvious as to what you were picking.
Mm-hmm. I feel like they may have had some sort of like GOG account crossover thing that they did, but yeah, for like console people, it was like just answer the questions. But
yeah,
cool. Well, you ready to go into our verdicts then?
I think I am.
All right. So the way that we rank, review video games, the scale that we use for the effing gamers is the classic A through F scale, except we have one above A, and that's S. S is a masterpiece, and F is hot garbage. So I've already kind of like talked about how this game is so important to me and some of the reasons why, and it's probably pretty obvious that this is an S tier game for me.
What? I'm so shocked. S for shocked.
S for shocked. This is still my favorite game of all time. And before I went back to this next gen port replay, I was kind of like waffling a little bit. I was like,
does it still hold up?
I was like, does it still hold up? Does it still have the things that I look for in games? I love Bloodborne. I really loved Elden Ring. I've had some really good like gaming experiences since this has come out. I've kind of discovered the Souls genre. Bloodborne, for the record, my number 2 favorite game of all time. This most recent replay, though.
Yeah, considering you made it to Blood and Wine already,
it brought it all back and was like, okay, yes, I do love this game. I remember why I love it. All that is still here. It still holds up. It's still such a great experience in 2023. I mean, it's still, everything about it, from all the stuff we talked about on like just the music, the visuals, all that kind of stuff. But then the writing, the characters, the gameplay, and then obviously now going back into it from 2015 me to me now, like I'm in such a different place in my life, but there's so much kind of nostalgia and like time and place and like emotion like tied into this game for me now, that a lot of that obviously affects when I go back and replay it. But even, setting that kind of stuff aside, if I was just going to rate this as a game, I would still give it an S. But, since this is our show and our content and it's my rating, like it's like S plus. Like for me, it's still the game. And something we didn't really talk about, but there are Witcher games announced by CDPR that are supposed to, like, there's a Witcher 1 remake, but then there's also
like a Witcher 4.
There's like another mainline Witcher game is how they've described it. And then I think like a multiplayer Witcher game that they've talked about. Like there's 3 games or something. And I'm very excited to see what those are and if they can connect with me the way this did, or if this is like a once in a lifetime kind of thing. But yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to the future of the franchise. I'm glad they're going back to it, because after we know this is like the end of Geralt's story, or at least so they've said. And so then they moved on to Cyberpunk, and I was like, man, I really hope that they're like not ever going to go back, but yeah, they're going back, and it makes sense why from like a financial reason, but also you see the love and care they put in this game. They really like this universe, but yeah. So S for me, Dylan. How about you?
For me as well, it's also an S.
Nice. It's been a while since we've had a double S, I think.
Yeah, it definitely has. It is also one of my all-time favorite games. I don't know that I'd put it exactly in that number one spot, because that's kind of an almost rotating spot.
Right.
Depending on what I'm thinking about and what I've played recently and whatever, Bloodborne or this or Monster Hunter will probably fall into that spot. But there's so much that this game gets right.
Yeah.
It really helps you feel like you are in the shoes of a Witcher in all of the systems and things that it puts in place. It makes exploration fun because around every corner, it's not just like, oh, here's a chest with some loot in it. It's like, oh, here's a side quest that has like an engaging story that at the end I will get some loot or whatever. But like, it gave me a reason to look around and explore and have fun. It's a game that I've been playing off and on for 7 years, like 8 years at this point. It's a game I bought a console for.
Yeah.
And it was 100% worth it to have bought that console for this game if this was the only game that I had ever played.
Right.
It's the story-based RPG for me that all other story-based RPGs have been compared to and will be compared to moving forward.
It's the standard now.
Yeah. Like, when we played Cyberpunk, we liked Cyberpunk. We thought it was a good game, but it was like the immediate comparison was like, how is this game compared to The Witcher? Obviously there were some differences,
right?
But it's like, it's such a story heavy RPG that it's like, yeah, like the characters are good, but I didn't like them as much as like The Witcher. The side quests were good. I wasn't as engaged with them as I was The Witcher. I think that's been part of the thing that's like, before the show, we were talking a little bit about Assassin's Creed. I think that's part of the reason why some of the newer Assassin's Creed haven't stuck with me, is because the Origins came out 2 years after The Witcher 3 and was trying to be The Witcher 3. And it does it's still a good game. It's still a good story, but I'm playing a game that's trying desperately to be this like story character driven RPG.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, but The Witcher's better. I enjoy the world of The Witcher so much more. I enjoy the story of The Witcher so much more. The characters are so much better in The Witcher 3. And and that's Origins. Like Origins, out of the 3 new Assassin's Creed games, is the best of them.
Yeah, and Origins was like the least RPG. Like it was open world and you had some RPG elements, but there wasn't like dialogue choices and stuff like that. When they went to Odyssey and Valhalla, they 100% were trying to copy Witcher, and like the dialogue choices and stuff feel like, oh, do I want to be in a good mood or grumpy? Like it just felt so surface. It felt so by committee. It felt so Ubisoft, especially when you're comparing it to The Witcher.
Yeah, because like we've hit on so many times, all of the choices you can make feel like they fit the world, feel like they have had the same level of care go into them. And it's all choices that make you think, like the last game I can really think of that I played that made me think in the same sort of way was like the Sinking City, which is more of like a mystery solving third person game. But it had that same sort of level of, like it kept putting layers on everything that you were doing, like every mystery you were solving. Same with this game, where every side quest you do, very rarely is it just kind of like hey, there's a big monster that's eating people, go kill it. Very rarely is that the end of that, dialogue. And it's like, yeah, I guess it really was just a big monster killing people, and I needed to kill it.
Well, that's how Hearts of Stone started. I mean, we're out of spoilers now, so not to spoil it, but it's like, there's a big monster, go kill it, and you do. But then it goes in a completely different direction from there and kicks off this whole long DLC side DLC quest. But
exactly. And so, and to me, that is what makes this game special in a bunch of things that make it special. I have to think, or I like thinking and questioning, well, what choice do I want to make here? What, none of none of these options is the perfect option. You
Right.
know, all of them have a bit of a downside. Which one is the one that I'm happy with? And like I said, I really appreciate that the end of the game gives you the chance in this very grim, dark world to have a little bit of a happy ending, especially if you have the Blood and Wine DLC, which at this point, if you're listening to this and you haven't picked up The Witcher, like just go ahead and get the complete edition, which is also almost always on sale for like $3 more than the base game, and just get all of the DLC that comes with it.
Well, at this point, like if you buy the next gen version, whatever, like
they don't even
it's all
sell the
bundled
base.
together. Yeah. So it would not make sense in the year of our Lord 2023 to buy the base game Witcher and then the expansions. It still wouldn't like be much of a probably price difference, but it just doesn't, like, buy it all together. It's all worth it.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think like they sell the base game of The Witcher, if they are even selling that, for like $5. They sell the complete edition for $10, or you could get like the base game and the season pass for like $5 and $10 individually, and spend a total of like $15. So I don't think you're really spending that much money if you're picking this game up. And you've played it on PlayStation, you've played it on Xbox, you've played it on PC. All of those?
I've dabbled a little bit in PC. I haven't done like a full playthrough.
Okay.
But also like when I say on PC, for me, it's not like, that's not the best place for me to play.
Yeah. But all of those I would recommend, like if you...
I've heard the Switch port is actually really good too.
Okay, I was going to ask. I don't know if you've played the Switch port.
If that's your only option, it's uglier, but...
It's also a game that came out 8 years ago.
Right. In handheld, it's like, it's fine. But the game plays and runs pretty well from what I've heard. Like, I would not probably play it there just because I can play it anywhere else. Yeah. But I've heard from just like general conversations and reviews and stuff that the Switch port is actually like they did a good job on it. So for what it is, it's really good.
Yeah.
It's just going to be the worst option if you have options. But if you have no other option, like the core game you're still playing is still going to be fantastic.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, is there anything housekeeping wise that you want to say as we bring this thing to a close?
I will throw out there that we have a YouTube video on The Witcher 3.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if you were going to bring that up.
It was one of our first YouTube videos that we ever released.
Like literally.
And it was not our, like, we've gone through several shifts on YouTube since that video came out. So I don't know that it really, I mean, it's still a good video, but I don't think I think we called it a quick review and it was like 15 or 20 minutes long or something.
It's like a mini podcast almost.
Yeah. So we talked more about it. Like this probably hit way more of that. But if you want to check that out, it is on there. And that's also kind of my segue into saying like, hey, we have a YouTube channel. If you like hearing about video games from us on here, we do have a YouTube channel where we post videos every couple weeks, also talking about game stuff. So check that out if you haven't.
Yeah.
It's more content, usually shorter content than the podcast. So
shorter, more kind of, I guess, structured, maybe like to the point content over there, which, I think YouTube, I think the stuff you've been putting out recently has been fantastic, been firing on all cylinders. So definitely think people should check that out. I will plug our Discord. If you want to hop in our Discord, tell us what some of your favorite quests were. That's the best place to do it. The link is in the description. We're also on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, all that.
Yeah, we'll see if TikTok's still around when this episode comes out.
It's always a gamble these days. And then the other thing I will plug is, just reviews or ratings on your podcasting device that you're listening to this on right now. If they allow it, if it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, whatever, if there's a rating system, like giving us some of that would really help. It's good feedback for us, but it also helps us quite a bit in fighting the algorithm, getting more eyes and ears on the show. So that would greatly help us out, and we would appreciate it if you enjoyed this episode, just giving back a little bit. With all that being said, unless you have anything else you want to say, Dylan, I think that was an episode right there.
Yes. I think, like, go play The Witcher if you have not played The Witcher.
And if you have played it, it's probably time for a replay.
Yeah. And, I feel like we keep saying like, oh, and let's but like it has like a pretty forgiving, like just the story mode.
Oh yeah.
Where even if you're not a huge fan of the combat or whatever, like you can still experience, like so much of the game is not the combat.
Yeah.
So much of the game is exploring and doing the quests. Like you can experience all of that and just kind of ignore the combat or like button mash your way through it. And like I said, it's a very, compared to the rest of the game, it's a very small percentage of the game when you get right down to it. So
I think if you played on just the story or whatever, you could probably like one-shot enemies. Like it's going to be that easy. So yeah, anybody can play this if it sounds like, if the rest of the game sounds interesting to you.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you all so much for listening. It's been a great episode, and we will catch you on the next one. We hope you enjoyed listening to this episode of the Friendly Neighborhood Gamers podcast. If so, we would greatly appreciate your help in growing the show and the community by giving us a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and any other podcasting app that allows it.
We also have some great videos on our YouTube channel, including reviews, rankings, and other topics. We would really appreciate you checking it out. And if you want to keep up with everything going on in the neighborhood, follow us on Instagram and Twitter, and feel free to jump in our Discord server.
We hope to see you there. Links for everything are in the podcast description. Thanks again for listening, and remember,
Stay friendly, gamers.